Have you ever heard someone call a cold or manipulative person a psychopath? Or maybe you've watched a true crime documentary where the killer is labeled as one. Movies, television, and social media have made many people believe that psychopaths are all violent serial killers. But what if I told you that you may have met a psychopath without even realizing it? A 2021 meta analysis published in Frontiers in Psychology found that only about 1.2% of adults meet the clinical criteria for psychopathy. And although psychopathy is associated with a higher risk of antisocial behavior, the FBI notes that many psychopaths are not violent offenders, meaning the popular image of every psychopath as a serial killer is inaccurate. I chose this topic because I've always been interested in criminal psychology. While researching for this speech, I discovered that psychopathy is a much more complex disorder than the stereotype we usually see in movies. Today, I'd like to challenge that stereotype. Although psychopathy is often associated with violent criminals, most psychopaths are not murderers. To better understand this, I'll explain what psychopathy actually is, why it has such a violent reputation, and where psychopaths are actually found in everyday society. Before we can separate facts from fiction, we first need to understand what psychologists actually mean when they use the term psychopathy. Psychopathy is not defined by murder or violence. Instead, it is a personality disorder made up of specific emotional and behavioral traits. Psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley introduced one of the earliest clinical descriptions of psychopathy in his 1941 book, The Mask of Sanity. He explained that psychopaths often appear completely normal on the surface, while lacking genuine empathy, remorse, and deep emotional attachment. He referred to this as wearing a mask of normality that conceals profound emotional deficits. Another expert, psychologist Robert Hare, who developed the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, or PCLR, measures psychopathy using 20 personality and behavioral characteristics, making it the most widely used tool for assessing psychopathy today. Common characteristics of the disorder include superficial charm, manipulativeness, impulsiveness, shallow emotion, and a lack of guilt. These personality traits are what psychologists focus on, not whether someone has committed violent crimes. So now that we know what psychopathy actually is, why does everyone think psychopaths are serial killers? Well, think about characters like Hannibal Lecter from The Silence of the Lambs, or even Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. These fictional characters have become the public's image of psychopathy, even though they represent extreme and uncommon cases. The Federal Bureau of Investigation notes that psychopathy can increase the risk of criminal behavior, but many psychopaths are not violent offenders, emphasizing that psychopathy should not automatically be equated with homicide or serial killing. To further emphasize this point, neuroscientist Kent Keel, who studies psychopathy using brain imaging and offender samples, explains that while psychopathy is overrepresented in criminal populations, most individuals with psychopathic traits do not engage in extreme violent behavior like serial murder. So while violent psychopaths exist, they aren't representative of the disorder as a whole. But if that's true, the next question becomes, where are they? Well, the truth is, many psychopaths live ordinary lives. They have careers, families, and relationships. In a 2012 article, industrial and organizational psychologist Paul Babiak explained that psychopaths can thrive in corporate environments by creating what he calls a psychopathic fiction, presenting themselves as exactly what coworkers or supervisors want to see. Rather than committing violent crimes, these individuals may manipulate others for promotions, power, or financial gain, sometimes contributing to workplace fraud and declining business performance. Psychologists also believe psychopathy exists on a spectrum. A person can display a few psychopathic traits without meeting the clinical definition of psychopathy. Understanding that spectrum reminds us that personality traits alone do not determine whether someone will become violent. Okay, so today we learned what psychopathy actually is, why it has gained such a violent reputation, and how many psychopaths live ordinary lives outside of prison. So the next time you hear someone described as a psychopath, remember that psychology tells a much different story than Hollywood. And understanding the science behind psychopathy helps us replace fear and stereotypes with facts.